Live before lock here, right here on Awesemo.com, as we are 1 hour away from the main slate on DK starting, 30 minutes away from FanDuel's main slate starting. That's one of the changes that has happened over the past couple of hours here. Fellas, appreciate you chiming in here, Jeff and Terry. Man, how you guys doing?
Doing pretty good, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Friday, I mean, no complaints. You know, obviously a lot of changes going on in baseball today, but just in terms of the slate, I mean.
Yeah, it's been a wild afternoon just trying to get everything updated for the show. I think I made like 14 different changes just from stuff that I had from this morning. It's a mess out there.
Yeah, so I did the strategy show this morning at 11 a.m. East Coast time, and so things have definitely changed. I mentioned about FanDuel changing their main slate. Initially, the main slate was 7:05 for them, just like it is on DraftKings, but now it's at 6:30, which includes the Nats and Orioles game. Then, of course, we had two pitchers who were scheduled to start. They're both out. Jacob deGrom scratched with tight neck for the Mets. Frankie Montas scratched due to upper back tightness against the Giants. Aaron Judge to the IL. So many things to talk to, fellas. I guess first off, just let's talk about the pitching changes. Montas was someone that I was really looking interested in, had some shares in him. What's kind of your overall take on the two pitching changes?
Yeah, look, there's still some good options on the slate, fortunately. It's not going to be a total disaster having lost those two guys, but it's obviously taking one of the top-end aces in all of baseball off the board for everybody. He was expensive, but, I mean, you know what you're getting from him. And then, pulling Montas, he looked like one of the better reasonably priced options on both slates. So, yeah, that is a big hit to the pitching slate. I think it's going to be interesting to watch where the ownership goes.
Yeah, the Montas one definitely is interesting on a slate with the, obviously Coors Field. He was looking really solid to me. I mean, obviously a Valdez there around the same price in DK. We'll obviously get to this, but, it was really going to split up the ownership in that range, I think, with all three of those AK pitchers in play on a night where people were going to kind of looking to fit in Rockies and Texas batters. So I think his scratch is, it kind of sucks, to be honest, because it's just going to lead to chalkiness on a couple different pitchers. But there is still quite a few names to talk about. So.
Yeah. And that's kind of the key, right, Jeff, is maybe if you're making this decision now, focus into the top pitchers tool and kind of look for those guys who are going to be under-owned, still trending for low ownership, even if it's in a different price tier. Just get away from that same tier ownership, because a lot of people are going to make that direct pivot and not really think about it.
I 100% agree. I mean, I had to pull it out of one line up, and I'm like, well, if I just directly pivot to a couple players right next to him, it's going to get, that's where everyone's going to go. So you want to change it up a bit. I think probably going up to a different price range, really good way to differentiate. Yep.
I know apparently it looks like FanDuel's down right now as people in Slack and over on YouTube are talking about that. Obviously, in switching the main slate over at FanDuel, a game that we necessarily weren't preparing for, a part of the main slate, the Nationals and the Orioles with Steven Strasburg taking on Tommy Malone. If you guys just want to kind of briefly just kind of, give a kind of general thought on that game for the people who are playing on FanDuel in that main slate.
So when I was looking at MLB.com, just trying to get the updates on on the probable starters, the most current probable starters anyway, as far as we know, they actually had Strasburg starting both games, both the renewed game from earlier and then the second game. So God only knows, but I think it's Strasburg against Tommy Malone, as far as I can tell. Strauss was ugly the last time out, and he's got a nerve issue in his right hand, which to me speaks to maybe he's not actually literally getting the feeling in his hand, so he doesn't have a good feel for his pitchers, not even trying to make a pun, just he can't feel his fingers. That's concerning for a pitcher. So, yeah, he's a reliable ace. He's a guy we know and love, 29% strikeout rate for his career. Just a little concerning with that, so maybe a guy you don't necessarily look to. And then Malone is solid season so far, but he's a 17.5% strikeout rate. Not a guy I ever really consider. 1.48 home run per 9 career, a guy who gives up the long ball to a degree. Same mix, even though he's performing a little bit better this year. He's got the same pitch mix, 87-mile-an-hour fastball 43% of the time. Not a pitcher I'm targeting for DFS.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, this is a game I didn't even prepare for at all, so I wasn't even set for it. I got basically nothing to add, but if I was just looking at it quickly, I agree. I mean, Strasburg to me is – why play someone injured like that? It just doesn't make any sense. And, Malone has looked good. I think he even beat the Nationals last time out, if I'm remembering correctly. But, sometimes that works against a pitcher too, seeing a team like that often. They'll figure it out eventually. So just from a pitching perspective, yeah, I'd easily avoid both these guys, I think.
Of course, this is MLB Live Before Lock right here. We're just under 1 hour away from lock on DraftKings. FanDuel, who knows exactly what's going on there? I know I just went on the app and everything was down there. Lock on FanDuel is supposed to be here in about 20 minutes or so. Of course, you mentioned at the beginning of the show about changes, and we'll get right into the Mets and the Phillies. When we were doing the show this morning, we didn't know who was going to be starting for the Phillies. We now know it's going to be Spencer Howard. At that time, Jacob deGrom was supposed to get the start for the Mets. However, he is out, and now it's going to be Walker Lockett getting the start. So, Geoff, let's start with you. Kind of your take on the changes here in this matchup.
Yeah, I think this one was starting out as, I know we have on Awesemo, like the Mets stack percentage was getting up there. It looked like an ownership, which surprised me a little bit. But actually, if you look at the prices, I guess it kind of makes sense. Wasn't really a spot I was thinking of, except for maybe like picking, obviously Alonso and Conforto, obviously in okay spots. But I'm fine eating this Spencer Howard chalk. I don't even know if it's going to be that chalky, to be honest. This is a pitcher with pretty good skill set. I know he didn't produce like a massive game his last time out or anything, but he's only 4K. I'm okay taking the risk here. And realistically, DeGrom getting out, it only makes us more attractive. It only puts him in a better spot for a win, right? So I think the big key here now, are people just going to ignore the Philly bats who are all of a sudden in a fantastic spot? A Harper Romalto, just mini stack maybe here. It's probably going to still go lower owned. Obviously they weren't projected to be higher owned before this. Why would they against DeGrom? But, now it's got me thinking like Bryce Harper might be one of my favorite plays here. Only 5,200 going up against over Lever, who wasn't good to begin with. I'll take some of that. So I definitely, it's a higher priced stack, obviously, if you're going to do that, but you're going to get really low ownership, and I think it's got just as much upside as a lot of places we're looking at tonight. So definitely switch for me. Probably try and get some Harper exposure at the very least.
Terry, I know you had mentioned this morning in your article, you were talking about your home run values here. You mentioned about Michael Conforto. You mentioned about Pete Alonso. Now that you know who's starting for the Phillies, are you still high on both those guys?
I am. I actually ended up writing up the Mets in my afternoon column, which is the stack slants, which kind of looks for a lower owned stack. They were lower owned at the time. Now I think they're drawing a little bit closer on the last update, but still a team I really like here. Howard is an excellent prospect, 35th overall, I believe, in baseball, a top-end prospect in the Philly system. I just think he's a guy who still needs a little bit of seasoning. If this were a normal season, he'd probably be pitching at AAA, probably wouldn't have gotten a call yet. Very good stuff, but he's a fly ball pitcher, which kind of leans into the Mets' strengths. They can throw a lot of quality lefties at him. They're throwing 4 quality lefties at him in the top 5 hitters in this lineup. Nimmo's getting on base over a 400 clip, so he sets the table really well here. And then you've got Conforto and Alonso coming up after that. Dominic Smith, not anybody's favorite player to roster, but he's going to be sneaky. He's batting cleanup in this spot on the good side of his splits. I like the power opportunity for him. Cano aging, but still wields a decent bat. And then you've got guys like Wilson Ramos in there as a great catcher option that gets a little bit of ownership, but not crazy. So I do like the pitcher. The pricing is great on both sides, 5,500 on FanDuel and the bare minimum 4K on DraftKings. So you're getting him cheaper than a lot of hitters on DraftKings. So it makes an excellent SP2 play over there. I'm not sure how much I would lean into it on FanDuel on the one pitcher site. If you really need the salary savings, you can definitely get away with it. I've got a pretty good projection on them, but I prefer the Mets bats. I totally agree with what Geoff said about the Phillies, especially if they're sneaking by after that pitching change and people aren't being sharp about that. Targeting Walker Lockett here is a great spot. He's 44th percentile in fastball velocity, 48th percentile in fastball spin rate, 69th percentile in curveball spin. So he's got a decent spin, induces some ground ball, but only a 15.6% strikeout guy over his 37 innings in Major League Baseball, and that holds up through his minor league career. Just not a guy who's any kind of good pitcher here. So I definitely like the Phillies bats here.
Just looking at our projections, Wilson Ramos, 19.2% on DK.
Creeping up there, yeah, you have to roster the catcher on DK. So it's a play I do like on FanDuel where you can kind of mix things up a little bit and get sneaky with him. Not a lot of people are going to put him into that one of those corner spots. You can go Alonso and him occupy both corner spots. Get a little bit different with things as you build with this team. So they're a team I like to build with because of that on FanDuel. On DK, yeah, maybe there's other sneaky catchers I think we might talk about a few of them. So.
Yeah, and realistically too, I mean, like playing a little bit of chalk with Ramos is fine because the pitcher on the other side is going to be higher owned as well, so it's giving you a bit of leverage in bigger tournaments, stuff like that. So I don't even really care. Like I think Ramos is still a good play, even though I do like Howard too. So
yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, attack the leverage there.
On the strategy show this morning, we were talking about the Yankees stack, and obviously at that point we did not really, we were discussing whether or not Judge would be in the lineup. Well, obviously we know he's not in the lineup to the IL, taking on the Red Sox here, and obviously the Red Sox have been beaten up the past couple of days by the Rays. Colton Brewer is going to get the start here for the Red Sox, and Garrett Cole over for the Yankees. Garrett Cole heading in today was the number 2 pitcher salary-wise on the slate. Of course, right above him was DeGrom, but now he's number 1. What's kind of both of your takes on Garrett Cole in this spot and some of the batters you like?
Cole's an ace. I think you can lean into Garrett Cole anywhere. He's a guy who struck out 40% of hitters, or 39.9 last year. I'll round it up. I'm a Yankees fan. 11,000 on FanDuel is a little bit on the pricey end, but you know what you're getting. You're getting a ton of quality. You're getting a bunch of strikeouts. There are strikeouts available in this Red Sox lineup. Verdugo up top at 13% projected strikeout definitely has a little bit of patience, but he's a young kid. I think Garrett's going to have no problem handling him. And then as you go down the lineup through some of the quality hitters, there are strikeouts in, a J.D. Martinez, a Mitch Moreland. So you can get to some of these bats. Cole does give up a little bit of power, does give up the long ball, but it's typically going to be a solo shot because he's not going to have a bunch of guys on. He's going to sit a ton of guys down with the strikeout. So I absolutely love him here. I think he's 11 on DK as well. If you can pay up to get to him, I think it's a great play. It's a great spot. The Red Sox rolling a bullpen game at the Yankees. Even without Aaron Judge, the Yanks still have 5 hitters in this lineup who have a ISO projection for season long of over 190 at least, and 3 of those are well over 200. A lot of quality in this Yankees lineup, and you can get to them very cheap on FanDuel. A little bit more expensive, but still very doable on DK. And I think maybe Judge coming out of this lineup pushes people even further away. They were trending under-owned earlier today in a great spot, and I think that'll keep people off of them. So that's like Gleyber Torres, who's been very cheap because he hasn't been that productive. But he's a kid who's going to be an MVP candidate in the future. He's exceeded what Alex Rodriguez did in home runs his first plate appearances. I don't have it directly in front of me, but I cited it the other day. So kid's absolutely a destroyer of baseballs. You got Luke Voigt hitting second. Don't love the spot for him, but gotta love the power. LeMahieu's still up top. He's an on-base machine. He's a hit tool machine. So I love the spot for the Yankees.
Yeah, I agree 100%. This is, I think, a spot, especially with the ownership not creeping up. I mean, I haven't rechecked like our stack ownership here in the last 30 minutes, but I don't even see the Yankees, so they're going to be under owned, which is awesome. Like I think if you're thinking about a place to go, this is probably. There's another place I don't mind either, but they're probably not going to be as low owned as the Yankees. So I think 1 to 5. I mean, we're talking about this pregame too. I mean. Like it doesn't look that good from a lineup perspective, but it's still a really good lineup. And I mean, you're getting really good salary on DK with guys like just from a perspective of Hicks through Torres. So I like going you can even just do a mini stack with LeMahieu and Vaught. But Garrett Cole was a pitcher. I mean, before I probably would have preferred DeGrom if we're really splitting hairs. I mean, the Red Sox. Their K percentage isn't that high over the last their last little sample, but obviously it's still Garrett Cole. So it's kind of just picking and choosing. And now we basically have no one else on the slate to pay up for here. I mean, you can obviously take you don't have to start with Garrett Cole. You can start on DraftKings with go down to Sonny Gray or something like that, or in the 9K range. But there's no issues starting with him. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't even really have a good argument why you wouldn't, because there's good value on the slate too. It's really just ownership, and again, he is going to be highly owned. Is really the only argument against Garrett Cole. So something to think about for GPPs. You're kind of all in or all nothing, because if you want to get over on the field, you're going to have to you want to double the field, probably almost have to have him in every lineup. So which really isn't a bad place to be. So,
and that Cole Howard combo is probably going to be pretty highly owned on DK.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
$1,000 price tag. I think people are going to go to that a lot. So, if you're going to use Cole, maybe consider see if you can find a way to get to a different SP2 than him, just to try and differentiate yourself. And if you're stacking Yankees, keep in mind there's a lot of good Yankees bats at the back end of this lineup as well. You got Mike Tauchman in the lineup tonight as a lefty. It's an opener as a right-hander, but more of the arms that are going to come out of the pen are going to be likely. So he'll probably face a few righties here as the game goes along.
What's your thought on Gary Sanchez tonight, just like as a one-off?
I like to stick Gary Sanchez into the lineup as much as I can. He still absolutely smokes the ball. I don't have it directly in front of me, but I cited some of his StatCast. He's just crushing the ball still when he does make contact. The issue is that he doesn't make contact. He's striking out like 46% of the time this year, which is obviously completely unsustainable. But when he does, he was in like the upper 88th percentile of hard contact, of exit velocity. So it's still there. It's just a matter of, old school scouts would say he's pressing, he's in his head. But
that's kind of what I was looking at this morning too. Some info that it just, it all looked good. It just is not going. So maybe this is the spot. That's just why I brought him up. I think thinking about like a one-off a catcher, I really don't mind that. Again, Red Sox are just.
Yeah. And look, the Yankees, you're getting all of those Yankees at a discount on FanDuel. Glaber's 27, Gary's 28. You've got Clint Frazier in there, super sneaky still. And there's a ton of quality in that bat. He's still a top prospect. He's just blocked in the Yankee system. Most other teams, he'd be starring in the outfield right now. So there's a ton of quality there. Even a Brett Gardner, sneaky as a wraparound back to the top of that lineup, is in a great spot. So I love this Yankees lineup top to bottom. I would be playing a lot of it.
Going to have some breaking news for you here momentarily, but I want to let you know that today's show is sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the most trusted name in fantasy sports. Yahoo DFS now includes CSV upload and CSV edit features for those looking to play multiple lineups. Claim up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Reward points by signing up and using the promo code Awesemo. Make better choices. Choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. Hear the guys talk about those great tools we have over Awesemo.com and get access to all those great Awesemo Plus tools and content for the MLB DFS slate with a Awesemo Plus MMA Weekly Pass for $15.95. This includes full access to Awesemo's leading player projections, ownership projections, and the all-new top pitchers tool and more. Get your pass today. Mention about the breaking news. We got another pitcher who has been scratching. That is Tyler Chatwood, scratched for the Cubs with mid-back tightness. Alex Mills will now get the start for the Cubs against the Brew Crew.
Well, that's a pitcher we can cross off and kind of move on with our day without worrying too much, at least as far as I was concerned. I'm not a big Chatwood guy. I wasn't really a believer in the changes. Just the note I had, 843 major league innings, 4.64 FIP, 16.9% strikeout rate. We know who this guy is. We saw him get beat up last time out. It was a nice start to the season. That's over, so not going to miss him much. Mills, memory serves, probably third, fourth start of his career, pitching pretty well so far in 2020. Needs some seasoning, I think. Sinking, ground ball inducing kind of guy. Top of my head. Trying to remember the notes from the other day.
It looks about right. As I look him up right now. But yeah, I mean, Chatwood was a guy who, I mean, you could have made like some kind of argument, I guess, from a GPP perspective, but realistically, the other side of that game with Woodruff was the more attractive. I mean, he pitched really well against the Sox earlier in the year. Kind of was unlucky loser. Just probably the better quality pitcher as well. And I mean, when I was talking about pivoting earlier, I mean, that was kind of the pitcher where, and again, like our, ownership is probably going to come onto Woodruff, but at this price, I'm okay with it. And realistically, this is probably positive for his win equity as well tonight with the pitching change. So even though, as we saw, I mean, Beacon, obviously it could have got really bad for the Cubs there too, without the pitching change. So the pitching change there doesn't make maybe it might make. I don't even know if it makes Yelich more attractive. It might not. So I wasn't really big on either of the bats for these for this. Wasn't really a stacks I was looking at. Really do like Woodruff though. Again, probably will carry ownership.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see what it would do to change up the pitchers, and I'm not going to have time. It would take too much to do it while the video stream's running. The whole world would crash over here, so I can't do it. But I'm curious because I was getting okay projections on the Brewers, pretty decent for the top end. But I think maybe the ground ball pitcher and some of his rates, if I plugged him in here, would bring those projections down a touch. So I'm curious to see what that would do, particularly in like the home run model that I have here. But maybe look at some of those Brewers bats. But totally agree with you about Woodruff. I liked him better going in here. I think there's plenty of strikeouts available in that Cubs lineup for him. And I thought he was in a good spot before, and the win equity definitely just went up. So very, very strong spot. Only 8,400 on FanDuel. I really like that, getting a nice projection on him. So that's a pitcher I would go to, and it's probably going to keep me off of Cubs bats, despite what looks like pretty good pricing on FanDuel. They're significantly less expensive than they are on DK, in a relative price term. So I might look into that a little bit just as a contrarian spot because they don't look like they're drawing any ownership at all. I don't have the top stacks tool in front of me, so I'm curious to see where they rank. I'll click over to that. But what are your thoughts on taking some Cubs bats just to be contrarian against that Woodruff? I'm not sure what Woodruff's ownership is on DK. I imagine it's pretty high.
It is getting up there. I mean, that's again the change in pitchers. Obviously, I think we have them around 20% with the ownership projection right now. So top two, he's really good top two value. A player you'll probably see mixed in a lot in GPPs along with like Valdez. So those two are about equal in ownership. So I don't think you're going to get, obviously super low on either, a lot lower on either one of them. So, and then from a Cubs bats perspective, they're going to be like nothing.
It looks like they're toward the bottom of the stack tool on both sides, as you would expect. But I was hoping it was one of those situations where they're ranked really low, but the percentage is kind of okay, kind of playable. But in this spot, they have like a 1.2% chance. I'll give this one away for free. They got a 1.2% chance of being the top stack on FanDuel, 1.3 on DraftKings. Yeah. They're pulling 0.1% ownership as a team on both sites. So it's a play that you can make along those lines, but that's not what we're looking for when we talk about that because their percentage of being the top stack isn't strong enough to lean into that play despite the lack of ownership.
Yeah, I couldn't put it better. It wasn't really a spot I was, that interested in. And even, again, I like taking shots with low stacks as much as possible, as you probably should when you're playing MLB DFS, but this wasn't really one. A little bit, I guess I got, enough respect for Woodruff and just the spot for him, which I think is really good.
Yeah.
So
yeah, same.
By the way, Mills 8,000 on DK.
8,000. I'd say
seems a little overpriced, but I don't know.
High price point. That's surprising.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember what Chatwood
was. Such a
was
late change.
I want to say was Chatwood 7,800.
Yeah, no, he was more expensive than Woodruff, wasn't he?
Yeah, I have him at 91.
Yeah,
okay,
which is crazy.
It was when it was earlier, but yeah,
that was a big overprice in my mind. That's an interesting price for Mills. He's not a bad pitcher. Just as a sneaky SP2 over there. I mean, it's high, but it's like if you wanted to play like two mid-range guys, he might be like a sneaky guy in that tier, if you get what I'm saying.
If he was like low 7K, definitely for me. He's still
be a lot stronger there for sure. Yeah,
that would have been a lot more attractive. But
moving on to the Indians and the Tigers. It's kind of Jeff. Let's start with you. Kind of your thoughts on this one.
I mean, feels like a really good spot for the Indians bats. I mean. It's Ivan Nova, so of course it's a good spot for the Indians bats. But as I remember, who's so many games in front of me. But this is an absolute smash spot. I mean, again, this is I don't know if you want to it might not be a place where you just stack completely, but I mean, getting a piece of like Ramirez or Lindor. Completely fine. Sandy Leon obviously available at the Bear Mint tonight. I mean, I'm sure he'll garner some ownership just because of that. But really good spot for Ramirez and Lindor. I mean, Savelli, kind of one of those pitchers probably going to go under the radar a little bit. But I mean, I think just from an odds perspective too, Cleveland probably still one of the biggest favorites, if not the biggest favorite on the slate. Yeah, second biggest it looks like. So third biggest, excuse me, because missed the Yankees there, but. So a decent spot for him. I feel like he's like a tad overpriced compared to the guys in the A range, but not egregious or anything like that. So realistically, I like this spot just for Ramirez and Lindor. I mean, this is just a really good spot for both those guys to go off. I think again, you have to look at ownership and stuff like that. And do you want to pay up on a night with Coors? That's really the only thing that is that's kind of sticking out here, though. I don't really love anyone at the bottom of the Indians lineup. I guess you could look to it for value, though. You got guys like Santana down there, really cheap as well. You could think about something like that. But the main thing is just, it's a really good spot, obviously, for the two best hitters. It's just a matter of, is this the spot where you want to pay up or not? So for me, it's fine, one-off, but, you got to take into account you probably want some Coors exposure and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, they're one of the higher ranked stacks on the board tonight in the stack tool. They're drawing slightly more ownership than they are probability of success, but it's totally fine. I think Savali is interesting on both sites, particularly on FanDuel, where he's only getting 1.6% ownership. He's not what I would consider a top-tier pitcher, maybe not even a second-tier pitcher, but he's kind of getting by this year. For his career, he's 22.9% strikeout, 6% walk, so he's got decent control. That's over 76.2 innings, so it's not a huge sample by any means, but that's all starts. He's 31% fastball, 30% cutter, and then 15% curveball slider each. So decent little repertoire. He's a pitcher that I like. He's probably been a little bit above his head so far this year with the strikeouts, up at 31%, 2.7% walk, so the control's right there. But I think we could get another sneaky start out of him against a pretty bad Tigers lineup. None of the Tigers are going to really be on the plus side of, I'm having trouble talking today. None of the Tigers are going to really be on the plus side of their splits here. And righty Tigers bats against the righty Savali. I think he could get them, and I think it could be really, really sneaky in one of those good spots on FanDuel. If anybody's heard me talk fantasy baseball this year, they know I love stacking this Indians team. I think the top end of this, just going around the horn in the infield, is a great option on both sites. They're less owned on DraftKings, so I like it a little bit more over there, despite the higher pricing. I think you can do some special things there, but you're right. It does take away from some of the other big options on the slate. It's going to be very difficult to get them with anything from Coors and any kind of reasonable pitching. So you kind of have to make a choice here. If you're making a ton of lineups, making 150 full slate of lineups, then yeah, definitely keep them high in your mix. But if you're making one, it's definitely a choice.
I know, Terry, in the shows we've done together, you've always talked about that Indians infield is always the way you're looking to stack. But is there any value bats you see in this Indians lineup tonight?
So the way they went, I agree. Santana's a good option late in the lineup. He strikes out a ton, but there's power in there. We've seen the power before; it's very real. So I like him there, and he's at a reasonable price, $2,600 on FanDuel, low ownership, under 2% on FanDuel. 4% on DK. Sandy Leon's drawing more ownership than I expected on DraftKings as a catcher. He's not very good, but as a part of a team that I expect to kind of go off, I was hoping that he'd be a little lower than where we're projecting him for ownership. But he makes a reasonable catcher option, hitting from both sides of the plate against a total gas can of a pitcher. I wrote up the Indians last night, and that's worth repeating. Nova's home run per nine over the last 3 years put together is 1.43, which is ugly. Yeah. He's got a 1.34 whip since the start of 2017, so there's going to be guys on base. That 1.43 home run per nine is the 26th worst in baseball in that stretch, and it includes several guys who are now in the KBO or washing cars for a living. He's below 17% strikeout rate each of the last 4 years, so Ivan Nova, not a good pitcher. Big target on his back with Indians bats for him.
Moving on, we'll talk about the Pirates and the Reds. I know you mentioned about Sonny Gray a little bit earlier going for the Reds. Chad Cole going for the Pirates.
Yeah, Sonny Gray is a really good spot here. I mean, obviously a really good ground ball pitcher going up against a team that honestly doesn't really hit many fly balls to begin with. So this should be, realistically, you just look at matchup. Sonny Gray's in the best position out of all the high priced pitchers. Maybe now that DeGrom is out, especially. So I really have no problems here. Gray's a guy obviously can get a little bit wild. So really the only concern, but he started the season pretty well. Good ballpark. It's just really nothing to speak bad about this spot for me. If you, it just comes down. If you're going to fade the Garrett Cole chalk, starting with him is fine. Obviously, you can go lower as well, I think, and mix and match a couple guys. But if you're going to play Howard, going with Gray and Howard might give you a little bit less ownership. He's not projecting to be super low owned compared to Garrett Cole, but you will get a little bit of lower ownership. So Realistically, just a really good spot in terms of matchups for Sonny Gray. I don't know. Maybe Terry can comment on his overpriced. Doesn't feel like great value or anything like that, but it just feels like the spot. I think he's priced fairly where he should be. So,
yeah, I agree with that. I think the best thing to say about the price is that it's appropriate. It's fair. Yeah. It's around what you'd expect to pay for Sonny Gray in this spot against the Pirates. It's an excellent matchup for him. I think you can definitely ride him for 10-8 is a lot on FanDuel. I just said it's appropriate, but it is kind of a lot with some of the other options on the board. He ranks right up there for me. I've got a clump of guys just like right in the same level, and they're all priced around this level. But he is one of the more expensive ones, so I might pivot around on the ownership. But I think that's what's keeping his ownership low. If he was cheaper, he'd be more owned, which is a very obvious statement, but it bears saying here with some other options on the board. So I like Sonny. I think we can get to him a lot. Not Alexa. I like Sonny is what I said. Sonny's a career 22.5% guy. He's throwing 50% fastballs this year, 78th percentile in exit velo so far this year, 88th percentile in fastball spin, 90th percentile strikeout rate, 96th percentile in curveball spin. There's those ground balls that you mentioned. So, yeah, very, very strong pitcher. I could make an argument for the Pirates bats at super, super low ownership just to throw them out there. There's some kids that I like, and they're very inexpensive, but I don't think this is necessarily the spot. If you wanted to do it, I would start with a Kevin Newman, Josh Bell, Colin Moran, Brian Reynolds, Gregory Polanco. Just look right in the heart of that order because nobody else is going to be on them. I wouldn't do it a lot, though.
Yeah, I think I had one bat ranked out okay. I think it was Polanco that looked okay. Otherwise, I'm just pretending the Pirates don't exist tonight. But I'd say same story. I mean, it's realistically probably just don't even need to look at this spot. They will be like insanely low owned though, so that's something to consider. I don't mind taking some value from the Reds, especially if you're going to play Sonny Gray. I mean, I don't think pairing him with like a few of their value bats is a bad idea there. Van Meter, Galvis at the back. They often have it's often a decent spot to look for value bats, so that's something to keep in mind. Castellanos still rates out well for me as well, so someone to consider. But I definitely don't mind the Reds just from looking from a more value perspective. So
yeah, clean up Jesse Winker, especially on both sites. Right now he's 3,600 on DraftKings, 2,600 on FanDuel, drawing well under 10% ownership on both sites, I'll say, and it's significantly under. I think that's a killer spot. For his career, Chad Kuhl is a 1.44 home run per 9 to lefties. So lefty power gets to him. I was going to call it out for the Reds here, so I'm glad you brought them up. I love the top 5 here. You've got 3 lefties built into the top 5, and then the 2 righties in there are Nick Senzel, who I think is a top end hitting prospect, and Nicky Castellanos, who we know and love already. So I like Red stacks here a lot. Chad Kuhl, not a very good pitcher, not somebody I trust. They're saying he's hoping to get up to 5 innings today, so we're going to see some bullpen action here. So I really like the spot for the Red bats.
Moving on, we got the Braves and the Marlins. Kyle Wright going for the Braves. Pablo Lopez going for the Marlins.
Yeah, so Wright's a top-end prospect. He's another kid that we're seeing. He's probably about ready, but he's just one of those borderline guys who hasn't quite figured it out at the major league level. He's only gotten through 5 innings in 2 of his 7 starts. Thank you, MajorLeagueBaseball.com, for that one. So far in 37.2 innings in the majors, he's 18.9% strikeout, but an ugly 16.1% walk. So he's allowing way too much opportunity, putting way too many guys on. He works in fastball slider repertoire, 40% fastball at 94 miles an hour, 35% slider. He's in the 35th percentile so far this year in barrels allowed and 37th in hard hit allowed. So allowing a little bit more hard contact than you'd like to see. Could be a little bit sneaky spot with the Marlins bats, but with all the quality on the slate, I don't think we need to go there tonight. And I think his talent is above the point where we really want to attack it. He could put up a very good start here. I don't love him as an option on FanDuel. He's only 6,500, but I don't think he's a pitcher I'm going to roster too much. I get a decent projection on him, but I'm not sure I need to pay that little for a starter here. I think I'm going to have the money to pay for some of those mid-tier starters who rank out a little bit over him. On DK, I think he's probably in play, 6,500 against this Marlins team. That could be another cheap spot that we could pivot to, get away from that Phillies starter and get on this. I know it's technically 2,500 more, but it's still not much to pay for a starter over there. against a team that we know is a bad team. Two lefty bats that we have to worry about on the Marlins roster, Corey Dickerson and Matt Joyce. Do those names really, really strike fear in anybody's heart? No. So I think we can attack this team a little bit over there with him. On the other side, Pablo Lopez is probably a pretty underrated starter. He limits hard contact a lot. In 2019, he was 90th percentile in exit velocity allowed, 93rd in hard hit allowed, 68th in barrels, so he's allowing more barrels than hard hit. But, I mean, those are still very, very good numbers. Doesn't strike out as many guys as you'd like to see, but he added a cutter this year that he's throwing 8% of the time. So he added a new pitch, working with a little bit new repertoire. Maybe it's a better out pitch for him. So I think we could see some more upside from him to come. I don't love the spot here, but we know there are strikeouts in this Braves lineup.
Yeah, I mean, you kind of took the words out of my mouth with Miami. I think if I'm going to attack one side here, it would be with the Miami bats and attack Wright because he's got the potential to be wild. I have written down here just Lopez, good ground ball pitcher. Probably isn't going to allow a ton of hard contact. Probably isn't going to get many strikeouts either. So you kind of worry about his upside. And if he was around 6K, I think he'd be a lot more attractive. But I agree. Like, I'm not really sure I want to play the Marlins, even though it looks like a pretty good spot. So, I mean, you could definitely go there. And, again, I'll try and give it out here. If I can just find it quickly, the Miami ownership. Yeah, it's not going to be very high. So it does look like they're in an okay spot just from, projections and stuff like that. What their possibility is to be the top stack versus what their ownership is going to be. It's decent, but it's still not really a spot I'm in love with. Like Tyler Wright too, Kyle Wright. I think in different sports now. Kyle Wright is a guy like I feel a couple slates ago people were kind of interested in as a supreme value, and now it's kind of just like now he's a good target. So he might be a sneaky start. I mean, for sure. I mean, against the Marlins. Again, he is overpriced compared to the other value pitchers on the slate, but that will just get you minuscule ownership, right? So. Right. I think overall, this is kind of a game I'm just like not really in love with. Maybe you could play like Ozuna at 4,400 as a one-off. That's usually fine. You could do like a little mini stack, I guess, with the Marlins. Go Dickerson and Joyce, but it's probably again just with this slate. I mean, we just talked about how good the Cleveland stack looks. We talked about the Yankees already. I mean, I don't know. I don't want to waste too many lineups, too many spots on the Marlins. So
yeah, and just to call it out before we move on real quick, the Braves do look pretty good in the top stacks tool in terms of a success rate to ownership comparison on both sides. So take a look at that. I don't love attacking ground ball pitchers, and I think that's ownership is related to the quality of Lopez and people being on him. But we know there are good bats in that Braves lineup. So it's not my spot, but it might be good.
Terry, I know you wrote this morning about the Twins and a stack here against the Royals. Kind of get your take about that. And, Geoff, let me get your take about Jake Odorizzi in this spot.
Yeah, so Odorizzi just feels, a little bit overpriced to me again. I mean, if he was in the 8K range, I feel like this would be a good spot. But he's a guy who's been around for a while. He's obviously had some back issues too, which is concerning to me. Used to be a pretty solid strikeout pitcher coming in. I mean, only making a second start. So you worry a little bit about pitch count as well. I mean, the Royals are a team that obviously can bat the ball around a little bit. I think it's a fine matchup. I mean, again, I just for the upside that Jake Odorizzi brings nowadays, I think there's just way better spots to go to. So not really concerned too much about the matchup here. If he was like 8,400 or 8,200, I think you could definitely consider it. But for, again, a guy dude who's now in his 30s, dealing with a little bit of injury issues, for me, he was a pretty easy just kind of ignore, as I feel like it's probably going to be the story for most people. So I guess the one, big thing that might stick out is he's probably going to be lower owned, and the Twins are heading in here as pretty big favorites here. So almost minus 200 on the money line. Always something to think about. Odorizzi, again, if he gets off to a good start here and at least gets through like 5 innings, he could definitely return decent value, but I think that price is too high personally. So he was a pretty easy, just kind of, not think about too much today.
Yeah, price differential wise, it's interesting. Odorizzi is only 6,900 on FanDuel.
Yeah, and that's sorry, and I always forget to talk about FanDuel. So it's
great. If those prices were a killer spot. Yeah, I don't know that I love it. Over on the one pitcher side, I'm getting a reasonable projection on him, but he's another guy that I don't think I need to pay down there to get that projection when I'm getting better pitchers that I like better at similar pricing, or paying up to get them, but not needing the savings. So I don't think he's really in play for me over there. The Twins bats, like you asked about, Jason, are definitely in play. It's funny, when I put my spreadsheet together, one of the changes I made as I was getting ready for the show, I guess Ian Kennedy had come down with my list from FanGraphs. So I had Ian Kennedy in there. And when you change a pitcher from Ian Kennedy to the current guy and the projections go up, that is not a good sign for the pitcher. So that's exactly what happened here. The Twins got better looking for me. They just look explosive tonight, getting great home run metrics up and down this lineup. From Max Kepler up top, Nelson Cruz is obvious. You've got Eddie Rosario, who I feel like never gets the respect he really deserves from DFS owners. Only looks like about 10.5% ownership. So reasonably popular in about the middle of these bats. The two guys I named before are more popular. So I like this stack a lot. I think it's probably trending around the right amount of ownership, but I think it's good chalk. I think this is one that we can lean into. Maybe figure out some creative ways to combine it with cores. There are cheaper bats on the back end, like a Mitch Garver on FanDuel is only 2,400. Marwin Gonzalez is a guy I love hitting from both sides of the plate. He's only 2,500, sneaky at third base on FanDuel, first base, third base on DK for 38. Lower ownership on both of those guys. And then Miguel Sano at the back end of this lineup is getting completely ignored. And I mean, talk about a guy with 2 home run upside on any slate against any pitcher. That's one of those guys. So definitely a guy I like to lean into on the back end of these stacks. Definitely somebody you can weaponize against this pitcher.
Obviously, FanDuel is being talked a lot about in the chat right now because it's down.
Still down.
I try here on my desktop. I've tried on the app. Neither one of them's working. So we'll see.
We got one lineup because I was going to be on the show.
we'll see what FanDuel has to say about that. You mentioned about the Rockies. They're at home tonight against the Rangers. Lance Lynn going for the Rangers. Jeff, let me get your take on this one.
Yeah, it's always interesting when you get a good pitcher going up against, obviously the Rockies in Coors. I mean, what do you do? I mean, it generally lends itself to lower ownership on the Colorado players. And right now you have guys like Blackman just going in through one of his Blackman phases where he just basically blacks out every night and comes out with like 20 DK points or more. So it's a really interesting spot. Lance Lynn is a pretty good pitcher, though. I mean, it's not really someone I want to attack. So I'll be dead honest. I'm probably fine. I would be fine probably fading the Rockies here in this spot. I do think there's enough upside in a lot of other stacks here. You can obviously play like a one-off here. Blackman would probably be the guy, obviously, with the matchup against Lance Lynn. So it's a spot where I'm definitely more interested in the Rangers, obviously. And I think that's going to be the story of the night. I mean, obviously, this is not going to be a low-owned stack or anything like that. Joey Gallo projecting. I'm sure he's still projecting to be the most heavily owned player here. Calhoun is in a nice spot, though, too. Realistically, starting with those two, you're getting good prices on guys playing in Coors. I do like Calhoun in this spot, but you can go all the way down to Odor, in my opinion, another left-handed bat. So, the Rangers have 4 left-handed bats in their top 7 tonight. That's nice. Obviously, Chu doesn't really bring that much power or anything like that, but we're in Coors, so I'm not too interested in the Rockies, though. I mean, Terry might have a different take. They just, again, with the ownership and stuff like that, I'd be more inclined to eat a little bit of Rangers chalk or just go to other spots, because it does feel like one of those slates where we could get where the Rockies game isn't necessarily guaranteed to be the highest scoring stack of the night. So.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's rare that you'll hear me say this, but I think if I was making 150 lineups on FanDuel tonight, I would weaponize a little bit of Lance Lynn here. He's only 7K. Yeah. I'm not getting a big projection on him, but that's just because of the park factors. So we know that he's not going to project well in the model. That's just something we have to change manually if we want to get to him in an optimizer. It's not something I love to lean into because it's a small sample, but he's made 4 starts in his career at Coors and he's been good in all of them. So he's got good career numbers in the park. What I like better is he's got a repertoire that works at altitude. He's got a slider cutter repertoire to go along with his fastball. His fastball generates his 86th percentile spin rate. So it's a heavy fastball. It's one that works well at altitude as well. So he's not a curveball sinker kind of a guy where that pitch tends to hang. He works a little bit more horizontally. He's able to work in this kind of air. So I think he could be sneaky at 1% ownership at that price on FanDuel, smack in the middle of that tier. I think he's got upside. There are some strikeouts in the Rockies lineup, especially with Ryan McMahon, David Dahl toward the back end. Trevor Story strikes out a little bit. There's definitely guys you have to dance around, and it's not a comfy spot. But if you really want to get different with a guy we know is a good pitcher, I could see it. The Rangers bats, like you said, extremely, extremely over-owned. Just looking at things, the one guy I would call out to maybe try and differentiate your core slate there is Elvis Andrus at the bottom of the Rangers lineup. Stick him in at shortstop. He's 2.1% projection to ownership on FanDuel, which is nothing, 3.4 on DraftKings. Everybody else on this team is in like the 30s and 40s. So, I mean, that's a way you can really differentiate this really quickly. Wrap him around to the top of that lineup, put Sin Chu in there, even though everybody hates to play him for some reason. He's always on base, hits the ball out of the park every now and again, good gap hitter. And then, yeah, you're riding ridiculous chalk with Willie Calhoun and Joey Gallo, but at least you're hopefully approaching it differently and they get weird with your pitchers and your other stack. That would be how I would attack these Rangers. I like their side better than the Rockies side as well.
Yeah, Lance Lynn, that was my kind of first inclination. You know, it really feels – it feels like an okay spot to take a shot with them. It really does. That's kind of why, again, I mean, we're getting lower ownership on the Colorado bats. And generally when I get the Rockies in a spot like that where their opponent is going to be like double them, really like to take a shot with the Rockies. But I don't know, man. It just does not – like Lance Lynn is a good pitcher and just doesn't feel like a good spot. So we'll see how this one plays out. Going to be interesting to see. I could see Lynn possibly factoring into some GPPs. It wouldn't shock me anyways. It's a very, very risky spot, though, so just take that into account.
Of course, we got 15 minutes before lock. I'll let you know today's show is sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the most trusted name in fantasy sports. Yahoo DFS now includes CSV upload and CSV edit features for those looking to play multiple lineups. Claim up to $30 in Yahoo Sports reward points by signing up and using the promo code Awesemo. Make better choices. Choose Yahoo Daily Fantasy. We here at Awesemo are excited to bring you our inaugural season-long fantasy football and best ball draft kit using the same tools that have helped make Alex Awesemo Baker the #1 daily fantasy sports player. We've compiled a package that will revolutionize the way you prepare for fantasy football drafts. For $29.95, our draft kit includes everything you need to prep, including rankings, projections, sleeper tools, loads of content from our experts, and the Draft Wingman, which will update team projection in real time based on who you've already drafted. And as an added bonus, new members of the FFPC, your home for pay-to-play season-long fantasy football leagues and contests, get a $35 credit when they sign up for an Awesemo draft kit, which basically makes it free. Don't miss this one. Dominate your fantasy and best ball leagues today. Looking at the later slate games here, guys, we've got the Astros and the Mariners. Let me get your thoughts here on this one.
Bumpy spot for pitching, in my mind anyway. Kikuchi was a guy that everybody was kind of looking at. Maybe he had turned a corner and started doing things a little bit differently, and he is definitely doing things differently. He's throwing 43% cutters, and he didn't throw it at all last year, according to StatCast. So that's a big change. It was helping him a lot with the strikeout in his first couple starts, but kind of hit the wall his last time out. So he's at 25.8% strikeout for the season, which is good. Still walking around 10% of hitters, which is not as good. 5.28 FIP, not so good. So not a pitcher I really love in a vacuum. And against this lineup, definitely not a pitcher I like. I think we can definitely target some Astros bats here. There's a total strikeout desert in the middle of this lineup from 2 through 5, and then down at the bottom, you pick up a few down at the bottom, but you got Yuli Gurriel in there at 6th. So a lot of guys who are patient hitters, and just we know about the quality. There's 5 bats that project over 200 ISO for the season in this lineup. So just a ton of pop, ton of power. Not really getting a lot of ownership. I expected them to be a lot more owned on FanDuel. Not getting a lot on DraftKings either. They're high priced, which I guess is keeping some of the people off of them. But I think this is a team I want to figure out how to get to against this pitcher. I don't see why people aren't getting to them more. So Framber Valdez, 7 innings last time out, more than I expected him to pitch from a pitch count perspective. He's really a fastball curveball kind of a guy, 60% fastball, 30% curve, 21% strikeout rate for his career, 12.8 walk, which is ugly. It gives a lot of opportunities. It's not the biggest sample size in the world. Gives up a little bit more power to right-handed hitters than lefties, but we know more of the power for the Mariners comes from the left side. So I don't love the Mariners play, even as a differentiated, weird contrarian type play here. So I think the Astros bats are the big story of this one.
Yeah, I've kind of been turned on to the Astros bats late here too. Maybe I was giving Kikuchi a little bit too much respect early in the day. I feel like that's probably why their bats are projecting to be lower owned. I mean, this is a player who is kind of like, obviously he put together one really good start and he's still really cheap. So I feel like people are just, he's got good stuff, right? But it's still like, it's an insanely good spot. I mean, the Astros don't strike out. They have some really good right-handed hitters. And also, just to add to this, like the Marlins bullpen is terrible, right? I mean, they have one of the worst ERA FIPS in the league. It's a really good spot for the Astros bats. I agree. This could be one of those games where they get him out, they get to him a little bit early, and then they just beat up on the bullpens late. So, gotta admit, this wasn't something I was super high on early in the day, but this looks like a really fantastic spot. Might even be up there with like the Yankees for me now. So just trying to see what their projection here is for ownership. I can't even see it. Yeah. So they're right next to the Yankees. So I think the Yankees and Astros kind of competing for low and stack of the day right now. I think the Yankees have a little bit more upside just in the tool anyways, but still a fantastic spot for Houston. And realistically, again, all these right-handed bats in the middle of the lineup. Super in play here. So
yeah, I think you're getting a little bit more value with the Yankees from a salary perspective, but I love the projection that I'm getting for the Astros. So I think they're equally in play. Just from you have to pay a little bit more, but it might keep people more off of them. So that might be why they trend a little bit lower on both sides. Probably both going to be fairly popular plays, but looking at my home run model, just to round it off here, I've got 5 hitters over 10 in my home run model, and then another 3 guys that are just below 10. So, I mean, this is trending as a killer power spot for me as well.
Then we got the LA teams matched up. Clayton Kershaw back on the mound for the Dodgers, and Patrick Sandoval going for the Angels.
So, what do we think we're getting from Kershaw here, Geoff? What do you
yeah.
What do you see?
I mean, it is kind of a strange spot. Like he's going to be like, I mean, his ownership projections are insanely low. Right. And I mean, I kind of almost want to say like, I don't get why, although I know it's, what he's done over the last little bit and last year and stuff. It's just so hard to predict. He's still a player who, I mean, 2 games ago, obviously looked pretty good. It's just, you're going up against, it's not really the greatest ballpark. Obviously, you got really tough right-handed hitters for him to go up against. So it's a little bit more interesting, I guess, now that DeGrom is off the slate. With DeGrom, I was on it. It was basically just like I didn't even really pay attention to Clayton Kershaw. Now that he's off it, a little bit of an interesting pivot, I guess, on DraftKings at 10-6. Still not really a spot I'm not all that interested in, obviously, but I think it's just, again, we got enough players in the 9K range with upside and 8K range especially. So for me, I'm okay. But what we're going to get, I have no idea. I think if anyone, you're asking anyone and they say they know what they're going to get, they're probably not telling the truth. So, we'll see.
Well, I was trying to buy time while I found him on my page. I had to pivot. I had to ask it. So, I totally agree with you. It's such a mixed bag of possibilities right now. The 10K is a big price tag for him. He's coming in at 1% ownership on the most recent update that I have on FanDuel, so it's very enticing from that perspective. That probably went up. I'm not sure if that caught the DeGrom update. But you're right. With DeGrom coming off, I think it becomes a more appealing spot. I think it's a spot we have to at least consider. He was projecting well all day for me, but I wasn't really trusting it. It's still mostly based on old data, and I don't know that he's that guy anymore. He is throwing harder this year. He's up to 92 mile an hour average velo on his fastball. He was only at 90 last year, which was an uptick from the previous year. So, I mean, we like to see that, but he's also so far this year 31st percentile exit velo allowed, 18th percentile hard hit, 18th percentile in barrels. So really allowing a lot of quality contact when he is allowing contact. Dicey. don't, David Fletcher, Tommy La Stella don't really intimidate me up top. Albert Pujols is old. Justin Upton is aging. Max Stassi, not an intimidating name. Joe Adell, super, super high end, but he's a rookie. So there's not a lot of bats to worry about here, but then the bats to worry about are Mike Trout, Anthony Rendon, and Shohei Ohtani. So you're talking about some very high-end bats to worry about. So it's a really tricky, really interesting spot. I think, you get to the back end of the lineup here. There are some strikeouts available. I'm curious. I'd be really curious if I was running crunches, how much of them I'd be getting and how much the public. I think I would want to be over the public if it's 5% or less on FanDuel.
Yeah, I would agree 100%. I mean, again, you're running 150 lineups. I would be a spot now. I would get some exposure, but you don't need much to do it, which is the nice thing about it, right? So one lineup, probably not going to go there if you're just running like one lineup tonight. It is really interesting, though. Again, I wasn't prepared to talk about it so much with DeGrom on the slate because I think he could have just gone to DeGrom, who had a really good matchup. But I don't know. I mean, yeah, this is like 2 games ago. He didn't look bad. His velocity is up, like Terry said. It hasn't meant anything yet, but maybe it's coming, right? So it's one of those spots where you're trying to get ahead of everyone if he does just start coming back to his old self. But yeah, super risky.
Before we go on with what about Dodgers bats against Sandoval here? Because I'm surprised. I thought Sandoval was going to be trending for a little bit more ownership despite the bad spot here, just based on the price. And he's a guy that people tend to like, but he's going very under-owned. But I was going to say attack him with the Dodgers bats. That's my call as far as they go. Any take on Sandoval?
No, I agree. I mean, I took a look at him. It didn't really rate out too well either. I think the right-handed bats. I mean, actually, I think there's a couple left-handed bats too. I mean, Muncy definitely hits fine against lefties. Actually, he's not even in lineup. Never mind. So Turner and Pollock there in the middle of the order. Obviously, Mookie Betts. Mookie Betts still not really projecting that highly owned either. So I don't really have a problem with it. It's just, again, probably not like I think I actually like the Astros a little bit better now than going to the Dodgers because you still have guys like Bellinger not hitting that well. But you can definitely load up on like the top 4 here because the Dodgers have 3 right-handed bats in the top 4, which I think is really good. And you're getting really low salary on DK on AJ Pollock, who's in the cleanup spot here. So not a bad idea, really, if you just want to take the right-handed bats and get a little bit lower ownership. But
super low on Cody Bellinger, too, despite the lefty-lefty. So.
Sure. And I mean, like, again, you get low ownership on, and even Betts is going to be like a little bit low on. So It's, from that perspective, it's probably good. I mean, you could add them to like the Astros and Yankees if you're just searching for low-owned stacks. Yeah. Yeah,
and we get interesting right-handed position flex on DK at the back end of this lineup too, with an Enrique Hernandez, a Chris Taylor. You've got multiple position eligibility on some of those guys too, so you can do some unique things with this lineup on DK. When it's low-owned like this, even though there's some expensive bats, they're a team I like to mix and match around on that side just to see what you can get to with them. You can make unique lineups with these guys fairly easily.
You mentioned about those 9K pitching options. Is Lamet one of those pitchers y'all guys are looking at?
I like Lamet tonight for sure. This is a player who, like he's gone up against the Diamondbacks I think once or twice already, and he's got like 11 innings where his numbers are superb. He is a little bit wild, which is the only thing. So again, but from a GPP perspective, I don't mind taking on a pitcher like that necessarily. He's had like a 44K K rate against the D-backs thus far, I think. So he's a high-end pitcher. He does have some control issues, obviously, taking into account, but he's looked pretty good thus far. I definitely preferred him over Chatwood before Chatwood got scratched. So again, I like the Padres bats, and I think you can pair him with Lamet in a I don't want to say low-owned spot because the Padres aren't going to be super low-owned or anything, but I don't mind pairing him. I like this matchup. I mean, the D-backs aren't like the easiest matchup, but they're not a terrible one either. So.
Yeah, Lamet's a guy, he's an absolute killer for me. If he'd been healthy these last few years, he'd be an ace that people just know and roster every single time. He's a strikeout artist. You mentioned he is a little bit wild. He's definitely going to walk some guys and allow some guys to get on, but he's just able to sit guys down. 33% strikeout rate in 73 innings last year, 31% so far this year. So he's controlling the walks a little bit. He's brought them down to, so far, a very small sample, but 7.8 over his 22 innings this year. So demonstrating a slightly increased amount of control. So far this year, he's, according to StatCast, he's one of those guys where it's weird. He's got kind of a slurve type of a pitch. So it's calling it a slider on one side, a curve on another side. But he's got that up to 51%, and then he's just throwing his fastball 49%. He's kind of foregoing his other pitches and just working with those two because they're his dynamic pitches. He's got this wipeout breaking ball. That's my dog scratching his ear. He's got this wipeout breaking ball that he just generates tons of swing and miss on it. So just really, really top-end pitcher from a strikeout perspective. Guy I love the roster, getting a really nice projection on him, and only 9,200 on FanDuel. So I think there's savings there, and the ownership isn't crazy. So spot I really like.
One final thing to mention here before we get out of here. Obviously, we saw the pitching change with the A's. How does that affect your thoughts on this matchup against the Giants?
Luzardo's a kid I like. Similar kind of a story to what I was saying about Lamet. He's also a guy who they confused the pitch between the two sites, so I'm calling it a slurve for him as well, but it's a plus breaking ball. He's got a sharp sinking fastball. He throws in the 97 mile an hour range, 96. The slider's in at 84 and is generating a 50% whiff rate on that pitch. So he's a kid I love. When I plugged him in for the pitching change, he popped up at a reasonable projection here. Yeah, he popped up as one of my probably fifth, sixth highest projected starter, and at only 6,400 on FanDuel. I mean, I've said several times you don't really need the savings tonight, but you can get to basically any bats you want if you plug him in. Giants lineup isn't scaring anybody, and I like the lineup backing him up against Johnny Cueto. So I like the A's bats, and I like Luzardo here.
Yeah, I think Luzardo is definitely a little bit more attractive on FanDuel. I think he's actually an interesting one pitcher option there, but a little bit harder to get to, I guess, on DraftKings because again, there's just so many bats you want to pay up for. But you can definitely, if you're going with like a Lamet or Luzardo, I don't mind it. I mean, it's still a really, really good spot for him. Obviously, he's at least cheaper than Montrez was, which is kind of nice. I don't know if he has quite as much upside, but it's still a really good matchup. I still don't really want to consider any San Francisco bats in this spot. I mean, the A's, on the other hand, you could probably consider. We probably haven't talked about it, but probably consider them 1 through 9, considering the matchup with Cueto. Maybe not the best ballpark, but
yeah, it's a spot where I think the bats just overcome the ballpark. I wrote them up last night as one of my overnight my quick hits column, and just love the home run projection on him. Matt Olson was my home run call for the day. If anybody out there is writing that down for our home run game, but I'm getting a great power metric on Chapman. Love Semien up top. Conha's an underrated bat in this lineup for both power and productivity. They're very cheap options as you go down. You've got Grossman, Piscotty, and Chris Davis all in this lineup. I thought it was going to be 2 out of the 3, so I like mixing and matching those guys. Chris Davis is getting a bum rap, and he's losing opportunities to the short season. He's still the home run hitter that we know and love. He suffered from a wrist injury that sapped all his power last year, but he's still the guy that was crushing 40-some-odd home runs a year in the last few years. So love getting to Chris Davis when he's this low owned. 6% on FanDuel. Less on DraftKings. I can't read that number from here, but really a spot I like in the back end of the A's lineup. I think you can go top to bottom in the A's. Tony Kemp is Tony Kemp, but from 1 through 8 anyway. Sean Murphy is the guy I had in mind earlier when I mentioned low on DraftKings catcher plays. Really like the kid's bat. He's unproven so far, but there's a lot of quality in that bat, and he's at like 0.5% ownership and $4,100 on DraftKings. Love that spot.
Of course, we have now reached lock. It's 7:06 here on the East Coast. Any final things you guys want to throw out there before we wrap this thing up?
Should be an interesting, fun slate. I'm going to looking forward to seeing if I have a lineup on FanDuel, if FanDuel exists anymore. Maybe who knows what's going on over there. But yeah, everybody have fun. Hope you build good lineups.
Yeah, go Lamet.
Good call.
That's my call for the night. Anyways, yeah, have fun. Hopefully everyone got the FanDuel stuff figured out, or I'm sure they'll figure it out for you.
I'd imagine if that's not happening, there's a refund coming everybody's way. So don't sweat it. Don't give their customer service people a hard time. Let them figure it out. They'll give you your money back.
There was a tweet about 30 minutes ago where basically they said we're aware of the issue, they're working on it, and we'll see what happens there. But that is going to wrap it up for the MLB Live Before Lock show here for Friday, August the 14th. Of course, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Also, if you're not subscribed to Awesemo, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell so you know when we are live. So that's going to do it for the MLB Live Before Lock show for August the 14th.